Yeah, I mean, if the board, yeah, the board can proceed if it's not being transmitted online, as long as the meeting's being recorded, right? The meeting's open to the public, and of course, it's been advertised, right? So it's a technical difficulty.
Okay, then let's go ahead and proceed. This is the chair for the purposes of the recording. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please? Just so we know who all's here.
Nancy Gentilcore,
Present.
John Price,
Present.
Lamar Russell,
Present.
Stephen Stroud,
Present.
Susan Denny,
Present.
and Dr. Miller.
Okay, we have a quorum. I forgot to do the first thing first. The meeting is now in order. We have called the roll. Let's see, next article is public participation. And other than the people who are sitting here as staff, I see no one from the public, but I'll ask anyway. Is there any public participation or a request to do so? Just in case somebody's behind the door. Okay, that takes us to new business, and we'll approve the meeting minutes of last time. You have before you the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the minutes for the September 18 meeting be approved as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Susan Denny will second the motion.
Okay. Then minutes are approved and accepted. Our next order of business is to consider a proposed amendment to the City Cape Canaveral Comprehensive Plan Coastal Management Element and Future Land Use Element to mitigate and adapt to current and future flood events. Should be an interesting discussion. All right. Zach, would you like, I'm sorry,
Do we need to do
Renee.
a roll for the minutes approval?
I'm sorry.
Do we need to do,
Yes.
I need to do a roll call for the
Yeah, do a
minutes
roll call
approval?
for this, yeah.
Okay, would you, okay, for the approval of the minutes, Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Nancy Gentilcore,
I approve the minutes.
John Price,
Approve.
Lamar Russell,
Approve.
Stephen Stroud,
Approved.
Susan Denny.
Approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, did I miss anything else? Thank you. It takes all of us to keep it right. Okay, without further ado, let's move on then into our order of business. And I'll turn it over to you, Zach. Are you going to summarize for us?
Sure.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, just the record, Zach Eichels, Chief Resilience Manager for the City of Cape Canaveral. I'm going to try and take this very large agenda packet and present it to you in a very nice story. A story that starts in 2015. So this is admittedly well overdue and something that we need to have done yesterday. But here we are. We've made it. So in 2015, the Florida legislature adopted what is now known as Peril of Flood, which is a series of changes that have to be made to one's comprehensive plan in the coastal management element, of which our comprehensive plan has, since we're a coastal municipality on the Atlantic Ocean. Fast forward to 2018, and the city conducted, with the help of a grant, its first vulnerability assessment in collaboration with the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council. You have seen and heard from representatives of that organization, one of which that you know is Brenda Serpernot, who used to be the city's old urban planner. So that vulnerability assessment was conducted to look at flood issues that could face the city throughout the 21st century relating to storm surge, sea level rise, a combination of the two, the 100-year floodplain, the 500-year floodplain, and shallow coastal flooding. and it looked across scenarios from today, 2040, 2070, and 2100. Now, that vulnerability assessment took about a year to write, and on the August 20th City Council meeting in 2019, that was unanimously adopted or accepted by the City Council at the time to move forward and to take its recommendations to do certain things. It found that the city, and I think it's no secret, was highly vulnerable to flood situations for a number of reasons. As you also probably already know, high amounts of impervious surface cover, so concrete, asphalt, things like that. Older stormwater infrastructure that wasn't keeping up with modern day rain events and their intensity. Hurricanes that can deliver storm surge from either the Atlantic or the Banana River Lagoon, or both. And then ongoing sea level rise that is making the lagoon and the Atlantic Ocean higher throughout the years. So from the assessment, there were recommendations made that the comprehensive plan should adopt the peril of flood legislation that was put into place back in 2015. Over the last 2 years or so, we have been steadily working our way to doing this and making changes within the elements as well as the future land use element, as you can see in the red areas in the document that was just presented to you. We made changes. A lot of the changes were first made with another grant that was done with the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council, I believe in 2021 and 2022, where they took a stab at it first, and then they handed it over to us. And then since then, we've been making some changes based on things that we were seeing and based on things that this are required of us, of the state, to do. I should also preface all of this that this is something the state, we need to do to be in compliance and to help with flood insurance and things like that. So right now, let me see. So right now, where we're at, as you know, there was a joint council and planning and zoning board meeting held back in March. I thought that went very well. And you heard about this initiative that we were doing and that we said we would bring it back, and this is where we're finally bringing it back. The new changes do a series of things throughout the comprehensive plan that would allow us to make code changes eventually. Those code changes would eventually also be brought back to this board for your review and then eventually to council. But they would encourage things like the use of low-impact development practices, green stormwater infrastructure, raising of city infrastructure, not doing certain things in certain areas of the city, and also perhaps most critically, the establishment of what the state calls an adaptation action area, or a AAA. We're calling our AAA, or our proposed AAA, the Enhanced Resilience Area, ERA, which I thought sounded way cooler than AAA.
So what are we going to use in the future? AAA or enhanced resilience?
To the state,
What's going to be our working language here?
it'll be ERA, but to the state, it'll be AAA. But colloquially, we will be calling it the ERA. There is an exhibit that was given to you that shows where our proposed ERA will be. It's also on that map over there. It's a little hard to see, I know. But it's the yellow hatched area on the west end of the city that starts in the northwest corner and goes down a little bit, I think, north of Center Street. That area was actually determined through modeling from the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council. That is their recommendation. By no means does it have to actually be that area. There can be more, there can be less. The state just wants you to make one. It was thought, since a lot of our scenarios for flooding showcase that the west side of the city is actually more vulnerable than the east side from storm surge flooding and erosion and things like that, and also due to the high impact economic area that area is in terms of a lot of our revenues now, and also some pretty critical infrastructures in that area of the city, mainly our water reclamation facility that treats all the city's sewage is in that area. So with the AAA, it would kick in certain new things and standards that would be put into the code that developers would have to do upon new development or redevelopment. With that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Abby. So Abby is our brand new Resilience Planning and Services Manager. She replaced Lexi Miller within the Resilience Division. She comes from the city of Titusville. She loves comprehensive plans and can't wait to talk to you about some of the more nitty-gritty of the peril of flood requirements.
Abby, before you get started, would you like to bring that tripod over here and put it in front of us here in the center? so that, since we don't have the public here, it won't impede anybody's view. Bring it over here so we can look at the references more easily. No, you don't need to do that. Just put it there in the middle, and we can see the colors. We know the city. Just make it a little working group here that puts together. Okay, very good.
Can you see?
Anybody need any adjustments?
I'll be fine.
You okay?
All right.
Thank you.
You can move it back a little bit if it'll help.
Perfect.
Perfect. Take that one. Let's see, you don't need to, well, Anthony might need to refer to it, so take that one and make it the same orientation as the other one. Very good, I think we're there. Now, if we need to look at
Half
it.
inch closer, Zach. No, just kidding, just kidding.
I'll just stand over there.
Now you may proceed,
Thank you.
Abby.
My name is Abigail Holmes, but you can call me Abby. I did come from the city of Titusville. I also previously, before that, worked for the city of Jacksonville as a land use planner there. So I have gotten acquainted with a few comprehensive plans in the state of Florida. But I thought that this evening it would be appropriate to touch on peril of flood a good bit, just so you get a little bit more context, since this did come out in 2015. So if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me and ask them.
I got a question right off the bat.
Go ahead.
So I am faced with this document filled with red lines. I read the other one, which is all black. Now this one is red. How do you propose to work us through this? We can, I hope we don't go line by line. We're willing to go in a narrative fashion. How are you going to work us through this?
The hope was that we would not go line by line. If you had any specific questions, we would address them
Agreed.
and then address some of the larger, I guess, things that would be impactful to the city moving forward, which we tried to highlight in the agenda cover in the bullet points. But we can go over that. We can go at that after Abby finishes
Okay,
her part.
and are you going to just tell us where you are in the document while you're working through it, or is that
Yeah,
necessary?
we could do that.
Okay, tell us what, yeah. Okay, without further ado, go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so just to kind of cover what really peril of flood is and what the language is in that Senate Bill 1094, it's basically requiring local governments to develop strategies to reduce the risk of flooding in coastal areas, like Zach said. The peril of flood addresses coastal management plans. As he stated, in this case, some of our edits are also going to include the future land use element. But we're looking at redevelopment strategies and formally recognizing sea level from this act. So we want to recognize and reduce the flood risk in coastal areas that are a result of high tide events, storm surge, flash floods, stormwater runoff, and related impacts of sea level rise. So I can give you a little bit of a bill summary if you think that would be beneficial for you. Okay, awesome. So when local governments like the city of Cape Canaveral are drafting coastal management plans, the peril of flood is looking to include development and redevelopment principles, strategies, and engineering solutions that reduce the flood risk in areas like the city of Cape Canaveral. We're completely coastal, so everywhere. But such plans must encourage the use of best practices development and redevelopment principles, strategies, and engineering solutions, as I stated previously, that will result in eliminating inappropriate and unsafe development in the coastal areas when opportunities arise. And so that's where our vulnerability assessments that have been done in the past, the current one that we are doing, that's going to help us to identify this critical infrastructure in areas that are vulnerable and susceptible to these flooding impacts. Plans should also identify site development techniques and best practices that may reduce losses due to flooding and claims made under flood insurance policies issued in this state. That's where the National Flood Insurance Program and our participation in the community rating system with FEMA comes into hand. Our plan must be consistent with or more stringent than the flood-resistant construction requirements in the Florida Building Code. And the plan must require any construction activities seaward of the coastal construction control lines to be consistent with Chapter 161 of the Florida statutes, which is their beach and shore preservation language. The plan must also encourage local governments to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, specifically the community rating system administered by FEMA, which we do. And we actually just underwent our recertification process for that, which happens on a 5-year basis. The proposed amendment to the coastal management element and future land use element of the city's comprehensive plan seeks to address these requirements in the Peril of Flood Act. And in addition to this, I'll just quickly touch on the community rating system that we just underwent. The CRS program recognizes communities that engage in floodplain management practices that exceed the minimum requirements of the National Flood Insurance Program. So we have been doing this for quite a while. I don't know, Zach, if you remember when we first started participating. This is a voluntary program, but it's becoming more so required for these coastal communities.
It's been done in the city since at least 2018.
Okay.
And like she said, we just went through our 5-year recertification. Right now, Cape Canaveral is a Class 8 community within the program, which means that all flood insurance premiums are discounted at 10%. Abby worked very diligently. We believe we are about to get a Class 7 certification, which means that will improve to a 15% in discount moving forward. That review should be completed within the next 60 days or so. And that will be critical to continuing forward and making sure that we're abiding by this legislation from the state.
Will we actually see those rate reductions in our flood insurance bill?
Those that have the flood insurance, the National Flood Insurance Program should, yes.
Go ahead.
So just touching on the CRS, I know this is not the comprehensive plan, but we should be including language that addresses the National Flood Insurance Program. It's encouraged in the peril of flood language. This effort, participating in the CRS, it's supposed to reduce and avoid flood damage to insurable property, strengthen and support the insurance aspects of the National Flood Insurance Program, and foster comprehensive floodplain management. So that's how this all sort of intertwines in what we're talking about tonight. And that's all I had to touch on for peril of flood, but if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to take them.
So I just want to list off some of the highlights that this amendment will do at the 30,000 foot level. And the language is laced throughout, as you can see what has been changed and what has not been changed in the red lines. So this will encourage the use of low impact development and green stormwater infrastructure with new development and redevelopment projects.
Where are you?
Oh, I'm reading from the agenda cover on page.
Okay, tell us when you're into the body of the
The second
document.
page at the back. Yeah, the bullet points. It's focused on improving disaster preparedness across commercial and residential properties. It's aimed at limiting residential density increases above those existing and allowed by the future land use element of the comprehensive plan in the coastal high hazard area and the special flood hazard area. Establishing a post-disaster redevelopment and hazard mitigation plan should a high-impact storm event severely damage or destroy the city's built environment in the future. So that is essentially developing a plan if the city went through a situation similar to that of what happened in Mexico Beach, Florida, where there was nothing left. Coalescing the findings and recommendations within the city's vulnerability assessment, as well as the goals and targets set within the city's 2021 Resiliency Action Plan into the city's comprehensive plan. So what that basically means is just making sure that the stuff that was in this document that was written after the current iteration of the comprehensive plan, they kind of just meld together and speak to each other. And then code amendments that require developers to finance and install utilities including but not limited to improved stormwater drainage facilities, flood adaptation measures, multimodal streetscape concepts, potable water and sanitary sewer facilities to serve their proposed development and redevelopment consistent with concurrency management and provisions to mitigate climate-related impacts, allowing for elevated and commercial residential structures to reduce flood impacts to properties in and around affected areas, stilting breakaway first floors, enhancing and preserving natural coastal resources that can improve shoreline resilience, such as the implementation of living shorelines, oyster reefs, wave attenuation devices, sand dunes, and then finally, prohibiting the implementation of any new critical and/or life services dependent infrastructure within the AAA or the ERA, such as hospitals, assisted living facilities, potable water treatment, electricity generation, in order to minimize risk to highly vulnerable population sets. So that's some of the bigger things that these changes would do, or at least allow us to do. There'd have to be specific codes written after this to allow it to happen. But Anthony, did you want to touch on the topic that we spoke about before the meeting?
Yes, certainly. One other issue that has come up, I think, since the proposed Exhibit A was prepared by staff, and this has come to the council's attention, and I believe most of you or some of you definitely know about this issue. There's an issue regarding infill development and elevations of proposed new projects on adjacent properties. So the thought would be if the Planning and Zoning Board is ready to make a recommendation regarding what's in your package, the thought would be to also bring this issue up, and staff's recommendation is to include an additional objective in the peril of flood revisions to include some language regarding that issue. And so I'll stop there. And I was pecking away just trying to give you a general idea of the language. I mean, it would probably have to be wordsmithed a little bit more, and then we would find an appropriate location for it in the document that you have before it gets presented to the city council. And the council's prepared to take this ordinance up at the next meeting next week. So that's why I want to bring it up to you. So I'll stop there before I kind of give you some general idea of proposed language, at least for purposes of the minutes, if you agree that it needs to be addressed.
Okay, we have a consensus of agreement.
Okay, so somewhere in this document, I have to work with staff and kind of wordsmith and review the placement. The language would be something like this, and staff, you're hearing it for the first time too, and I think I'm reading it out loud for the first time. It would read something like, during the land permitting process, the city shall evaluate proposed elevations of new and redevelopment projects to ensure compatible elevations with adjacent properties and rights of way. The purpose of the evaluation shall be for purposes of mitigating potential flooding and runoff to adjacent properties and rights of way that could potentially be caused by the new or redevelopment project. Code of Ordinances will require compatible elevations and site development mitigation techniques to reduce potential risk of flooding from new and redevelopment projects. I can read that again if you would like, but I think.
Could you read that again?
Read it again, please.
Everybody's looking at me kind of puzzled.
I think something like that we should probably study the potential unintended consequences or what's already required by code or different ways to require it in code before putting it into an ordinance. Because for example, I'm just thinking that our stormwater code, which will be updated subsequent to this, is supposed to address exactly that. But I do have concerns. For example, this is a larger scale, but hotels, a lot of them are raised and have the underflow. Because as sea level rises and as stormwater is creating greater impact, I think we might be hindering ourselves, if you're a property owner, to mitigate something that's already mitigated. So I think maybe further consideration or study or discussion of it would be have less unintended consequences potentially.
Okay, so good points. Those are the types of things that would be addressed in the land development regulation. So the purpose of this language is just to lay out the objective in the comprehensive plan. So my thought is, I mean, this objective would be during the land development permitting process, the city shall evaluate, we're not imposing anything right now, proposed elevations of new and redevelopment projects to ensure compatible elevations with adjacent properties and rights-of-way.
But how does that affect the permitting process? Here comes a person who wants to develop. And so the city is going to study it and evaluate it. Meanwhile, this person is waiting on a permit. How does that work?
That gets incorporated into, as Brianna indicated, it gets incorporated into the city's stormwater regulations, this, as part of the permit process. My thought would be the objective that's in the comprehensive plan requires this evaluation as part of the permitting process. It's kind of an enabling general objective. The objective is not for purposes of imposing the specific regulation. It's requiring at least the evaluation in required land development permitting process. So it would be, it's more like a directive to incorporate this evaluation in the land development permitting process. There's a lot of, I think, technical, engineering issues that are going to have to be looked at regarding this, because in infill, I know with other cities too, it's a complicated issue, because everybody wants to build up, right, to prevent flooding on new development properties, but it does have unintended consequences on adjacent properties if not done correctly. So, rather than just having a minimum requirement and just say, hey, everything's good, I think the intent would be, and I know it's coming up at the council meeting, that there be more attention given to the evaluation of the elevation that's being proposed for new development projects, and that mitigation techniques be incorporated into a final permit.
So I think that sentence you just said would be a good language to include, because it's more general instead of saying, like that last sentence you just said. I know we're recording. I think that would be perfect as language.
Yeah, I mean, we can wordsmith the language. I think we're trying to get everybody to understand, the concept that I just know is just going to be addressed at the city council meeting, and it's not in this particular document. But the last sentence that I had is that the code of ordinances will require this compatible elevation and site development mitigation techniques to reduce potential risk of flooding from new and redevelopment projects on adjacent property and right-of-way.
So I meant the last sentence that you said, not in the write-up. The last sentence that you stated, if I recall correctly, it was something along the lines of that as part of the development process, city staff, staff will adopt an ordinance or will consider an additional step in the site development process that requires looking at elevations, I don't know if it's finished floor or topo, related to all of the surrounding sites and roadways. So something that says, it needs to be considered.
Okay. I mean, we got the last sentence I just threw out there was part of the first two sentences are that it will be evaluated. Then you got the purpose of the evaluation, and then you have the end all is that this is going to be done. The code of ordinances are going to require this compatibility evaluation. You don't want, we can, again, this would have to be wordsmith, but the concept is that the ordinances, the land development regulations, not pursuant to a directive of the comprehensive plan, is going to require more attention be placed on this issue. That's, I think, the issue, right, Zach, that we're trying to bring up, because it's going to come up.
Oh, it's definitely going to come up.
And I don't want the board not to at least consider it, because it's just not in this draft yet, because this is an evolving issue. So I think the council would appreciate your view.
Yeah, I think should keep it in front of us. Let's just get after that. What's going to happen? What I'm thinking is this is going to result in some criteria, some concrete numbers. How high? How many feet are we talking about? That's what we're going to boil this down to.
Right.
And there's I know underneath all this veiled language is the development property up in my neighborhood, which has been infilled and causing concern about flooding nearby properties. And we don't have any criteria. We don't have any footage. We have no elevation numbers. So I guess this little rambling of mine results in, are we going to come up with actual numbers in these
Eventually.
regulations?
Well, eventually, you're going to get a staff recommendation, which I would think is going to include the recommendation of the city engineer
Yeah.
on how to deal with this from a technical standpoint. The only reason why I'm bringing it up here is that this is more of a policy document, right? The comprehensive plan.
Right.
And, you know, if something's important, then at least you should have a directive in the comprehensive plan. You know, so, you know, that supports the future adoption of land development regulations on this point. Because then you can clearly say that the land development regulations that are adopted later are consistent with the comprehensive plan. Because as you know, this board's fully aware, any land development regulations inconsistent with the comprehensive plan are not enforceable in the state of Florida, right? So if the intentions are to address this issue in the future in land development regulations, I would advise you that you need to have some nice enabling ordinance to insulate you from an inconsistency challenge later on down the road when someone says you're imposing something that is inconsistent with the comp plan. We would turn around and if someone were to make such a silly argument, we would turn around and point them to a policy statement or an objective statement in the comprehensive plan to dispense with that argument.
Okay, so we're going to, out of this, we'll come out with a policy that says we will evaluate nearby properties or the consequences in the permitting process.
Correct.
That's going to be the policy.
That's correct.
right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's, I
That's
mean,
a good
we'll-
policy.
We'll wordsmith it, but if, you know,
Yeah.
if you want to include that in this policy, give that direction, and we'll make sure the planning and zoning board, the city council understands that, you know, you're recommending that be included.
I didn't realize I was being so profound. I thought that's where we were headed anyway.
No, you're right, as always.
Hit the nail on the head.
No. Don't fill my
Mr.
head.
Chairman?
Yeah,
Okay.
this first step allows us to take those technical things later on, head on. So,
But the policy gives us the leeway to attack the problem and talk about it.
yes,
And it says we will talk about it. We
Oh,
will
yeah.
Evaluate it.
yeah, there'll be a lot of, this is good job security. There'll be a
All
lot
right.
of things to figure out after this, for sure.
So
And-
we'll wordsmith it, and we got to do it pretty quick. You said it's going before the council next week?
Yeah, I mean, it would, I mean, if you want to keep it pretty straightforward, I mean, I elaborated more on the purpose, but if you can condense it down, the board would recommend that there be an objective in this document, the comp plan, that says something like, the code of ordinances will require compatible elevations and site development mitigation techniques to reduce potential risk of flooding from new and redevelopment projects on adjacent properties and right-of-way.
Well, it sounds pretty.
That's a directive, not a, you know, specific regulation, but a directive that ordinance is going to have to be prepared and presented for your recommendation in the future.
And to add, the intention, so, you know, as planners, our Bibles are the comp plan and the code of ordinances, right? And so anytime a discretionary application comes before you or another board or even council, it is always required that it complies with the comprehensive plan. So anything in for example, we have a hotel coming to y'all soon, in 2025. And in that, we have to analyze applicant has to prove it, staff has to analyze, and then you all have to find that it is in conformance with the comprehensive plan.
We've had that drilled into our head over many
Okay,
years.
okay.
So you don't have to play that card too many more times. We get it. In fact, we've had our head hammered with it.
Okay.
You'd better be compatible with the comp plan. The first thing you do is work your comp plan. Then do the technical. Okay. Let's fix it so that we can take it toward the council with a pretty definite policy.
I like your wording. That
Yeah.
it gives us the policy to, you know,
I like it.
rely on.
If we have to change it a little bit or tweak it, fine. I don't need to see it again. So next time we see this or hear about it will be when we're sitting with the council dealing with it?
Next
Get it
Tuesday.
approved? What?
Next Tuesday, the city council's going to conduct a transmittal hearing.
Yeah.
Before this, if they adopt it, it goes to the state for review by state reviewing agencies. Then it comes back later for final adoption, probably sometime in February, March. So, you know, the recommendation from staff is everything that you see in red line in that exhibit that they handed out, those are the proposed changes. You've read them in a nice clean copy, but that highlights the changes that you read before tonight's meeting. And then with the added recommendation that language be placed in there also that says the Code of Ordinances will require compatible elevations and site development mitigation techniques to reduce potential risk of flooding from new and redevelopment projects on adjacent properties and right-of-way.
Where do you think you're going to put that in here?
Not quite sure yet. Zach and I were talking about that before the meeting. It's going to fit in there somewhere. It might go in the proposed changes to the future land use element is my thought at the moment. I think it might fit in there. Because there's also some other provisions about development and redevelopment. Yeah, there's a proposed policy change that's in the future land use element, CM 1.138, that says required development and redevelopment to have minimum elevations above base flood elevations, et cetera, et cetera. Seems like maybe that's a good place to add another policy that I just.
Which policy was it?
CM 1.13.8.
1.13, okay.
Yep, it's on page 19 of the handout. I'll let Zach make the call,
I
but
am
It could-
totally at sea.
Goal LU-1 might also be a home
We're going
for
with
it.
these page numbers?
Objective LU 1.1.
19.
oh, that's the coastal, I'm saying, that's the coastal
Keep
management, and then there
looking up
might be
here,
a
looking at
land
policy
use
numbers,
element.
and I don't see the policy.
Am I in the right way?
I wouldn't get hung up on where it goes. It needs to go in there somewhere. I mean, Zach and staff.
Yeah, I just want to be where you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where you said it originally is probably a good place.
I just picked that up because we're talking about minimum elevations above flood.
Yep.
I mean, that's one thing, right? Now, the next is, you know, you got to evaluate the elevations, to make sure they don't cause flooding on adjacent properties, right?
Are we focusing on finished floor elevation or topography?
We're talking about the base elevation of the construction site.
So topography.
Yeah,
Okay.
because the goal is to not flood
I mean, you end
So
other
not
people.
regulating, not including finished floor elevation, because I thought that was.
I mean, I leave that to the city engineer to come up with, I mean, mitigating techniques. I mean, I think it has to do with infill and the topography of the site, but it also could have a lot to do with the elevation of the foundation too, right? I think you see developers taking both approaches.
Want to put some words in there that the city engineer has to work that magic. bring
I think that's
forward
gonna come
mitigation
back.
techniques.
Yeah, you can, I don't think that needs to go into the, well, you could put that in there. I mean, mitigation techniques recommended by the city engineer.
That sounds good. I don't know. Sounds good right now. Go and work it. Go work it. It sounds good to me by the city engineer. That way, they're involved. That city engineering office is involved. It's not just some Kentucky windage. It's,
I mean, that's a good point, right?
okay, where are we?
Recommending, the document as presented, plus adding somewhere in that document, and to be determined by staff, an objective that says the code of ordinances will require compatible elevations and site development mitigation techniques recommended by the city engineer to reduce potential risk of flooding from new and redevelopment projects. Something like that. On adjacent properties and right away.
Something like that.
Something like that. Okay.
But that's the, again, it's gonna have to be wordsmith, it's gonna have to be presented to council, that may change, but I think it's the concept
Yeah. In comprehensive
and
plans,
the
I think.
intent of the language.
Yeah, it's always, I was told at least to err on the side of a little, not being too technical in the comprehensive plan to give you some wiggle room to work with in the future, future-proof the plan, if you will.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
pros and cons and different approaches. That's
Much appreciated. The
not always the best case.
comp plan needs to have wiggle room so you can be as technical as you need to down the road in the ordinance.
Especially on something like, on this one, I would definitely agree with that approach because it's going to be so technical. Mitigation techniques will undoubtedly change over time as, engineering, ideas are, formulated. I mean, the building construction techniques change over time. So last thing you want to do is have to keep going back, amending the comp plan through the state process to make those changes. Very technical.
Yeah. Give leeway for future developments. Yeah. Some bright people may come forward with new techniques that we don't know about today.
Definitely know that about rocket technology,
Yep.
as you would know.
Yep. Okay, where are we now?
Asking for a recommendation. Right? Is that the end of the?
That's
I think that was
correct.
the end of your presentation, right?
I had nothing else.
Well, okay, let me ask it this way then. We started a conversation. We talked about this document. We got into a policy, a major policy. Are there any other major policies that we need to go touch on before we leave this?
The only one that I would appreciate some consensus on was, does the board in fact like the area depicted as the AAA or the Enhanced Resilience Area, the yellow hatched area in one of your exhibits? I don't remember which one. Renee, can you pull that up on the big screen, please?
Does the board be more definitive? What is it you're asking that we like?
The placement of it in the city and the area that it covers or would cover.
Attachment 5.
Okay.
Just back out.
Okay, I don't have any hard and fast feelings about that. Somebody could bring forward some thinking. Okay, Zach, back up now and coach us again on
Sure.
what we just did.
So the map that you see on the screens in front of you, that denotes the proposed adaptation action area as it's known by the state. It'll be known as the Enhanced Resilience Area in the city of Cape Canaveral. This is an area, as you can see by the flood projection maps, that is more vulnerable to flooding than some other parts of the city with storm surge and sea level rise. So, and it's also an area of high economic impact for the city, which is why it was denoted to be overlaid in that location. It can, once adopted, always be changed or added to or reduced, but that is where we wanted to start. And I just wanted to make sure that the board members were comfortable with this before we present it to council and see if they're okay with it as well.
Okay, so thinking out loud here now, we have defined an area of importance.
Correct.
What are we going to do with that? Where do we go next with it?
So the AAA would instill codes that are, I would say, code plus, if you will, where it would require certain things to be done by a development or a new development to conform to the higher risk of flooding in this particular area as opposed to others.
Okay, so we're going to put that kind of idea in the policy?
That's correct.
Boy, I don't know how you do that, Zach, other than build a 9-foot wall around the city of Cape Canaveral.
I hope it doesn't come to that.
Elevate
but-
every building by 9 feet, and then we're safe.
We could do like they did in New Orleans,
What's that?
put the levee around it.
Yeah, that's,
New Orleans is in a bowl.
that's what I'm saying.
Very
We have a levee.
big pumps.
Well, okay, we've got to start somewhere, and this is it.
Yeah.
We start the war where you're at, and here we are.
That area of the city also historically has poor soils. It doesn't drain as well as the eastern portion that has natural sand in it.
Yeah.
Most of that was fill material.
I have served on the Board of Trustees for the Methodist Church down in Cocoa Beach. And we've done some building in that area. And I have done some work with Allen Engineering. And I've seen their soundings and, you know, everything that gets built, you have to have a sounding and go and find out what the soil is underneath. This whole peninsula floats on sand and mud.
Yep.
So I don't know how we protect ourselves other than build dikes. But that's down the road. I lived in Holland for a year.
Really?
If you want to know how to protect the country,
Move to
go
Holland.
give Holland a look. You know, they know how to keep the ocean out.
That's a good idea. We'll take a
Field trip, yeah.
we'll take a board field trip there.
Get the funding, yeah.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, what else? Are we there?
That was pretty much all I had, unless anyone has specific questions about any of the language. I know it's a lot, but it's a long time coming.
Well, okay, we covered this at a pretty high level, but I think we drilled down where we needed to. So now that we've had this discussion, a little bit of workshopping, I'll just open it up and say, anybody want to talk about anything or bring forward any question or delve into any part of the discussion that was interesting to you that might?
Mr. Chair, if I may, one more thing that's actually really important, just wanted to bring up to you. So the city's current vulnerability assessment, which is this document right here, it's been on the website for 5 years.
Right.
This is going under a complete revision, also required by the state.
Okay.
It was a shame because we finished it in 2019, and then about 3 years later, the state said, actually, you have to redo the whole thing.
Well, at least you knew
So-
what you were working with.
Yes. So the new one is being done with the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council and is being paid for by a $225,000 grant that the city got. Doing that,
Hold up there a minute. So we get $225,000 from the state. Who gets the check? The mayor, the city council, the planning department.
The city gets it to pay the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council to rewrite the vulnerability assessment.
Oh, we're going to take that money and give it to the planning council?
Yeah. Because they have the technical expertise and the modeling required to do it.
Okay, not objective.
Yeah.
just curious.
But the importance of this is this will allow us to further mirror these documents into the comprehensive plan changes. It also keeps us eligible for grant funding from the state.
Right,
If you don't update your vulnerability assessment, they lock you out, which is bad.
very important.
That'll keep us in line with that. The current one is about 90 pages. We were told by the Planning Council a few weeks ago, there's a preliminary first draft floating around. It's upwards of 400 pages. Most of it is modeling data that the state now requires for every single piece of critical infrastructure listed in your city. So every lift station gets its own few pages of models for flooding, every building. They said as an example of Volusia counties that they're doing, the document was over 1,000 pages in length. So that'll be fun to take to you when we bring to that, but that's got a little bit more to go. But I just wanted to point it out there before you open it up for discussion.
Okay, so there's a lesson there. We're going to need money to do that.
We have the money, we're good.
And don't be bashful about it, asking for more. Because when we, as I said before, and I like telling this story, the city of Cape Canaveral built the very first comprehensive land use plan in the state of Florida. We got a grant of some thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. And we gave it to a consultant who was very good, recommended by the state, and they built a comp plan for us. You ought to see it. I hope it's in the file somewhere. It's about that thick. It has every bush, plant, seed, anything that ever grew on this little peninsula, whether it's animal or vegetable. I mean, it had there's a world of data in there. And then we slowly shed it off and said, we don't need all this, we just need these policies to work from. And then we built our ordinances. But what I'm saying is we had to have money. We paid out money to get that information. So when it comes time to build these documents, don't be bashful about that, asking for grants.
We love grants.
Put Rocky on it. He's a good money bird dog.
That's true. Thank you.
Let's see. What else are we doing? Okay, let me open it up then. Steve, you got any thoughts about anything you want to talk about? We were going to council in front of it in a week, so.
Compatibility of elevations, I like that phrase, compatibility of surrounding elevations in order to go in and assess any elevation prior to construction. It's compatibility of everything surrounding to make sure it fits. So there's just not a single one number that you can put on anything. It's got to all be surveyed to find out, the appropriate slopes, the falls, and everything that you need with that. So
It's got to be drained.
it's got, you gotta make sure that it's not going to drain into somebody else's place and flood. You have like you were saying earlier, you've got somebody that's come in and they've built up this land and then finally did their slab, and a lot of people are concerned because of the flooding it's going to cause. I'm seeing that already in our town. I know of examples of it that we already have. Another thing I wanted to mention is in the resilience area, enhanced resilience area. More than a year ago, I took a tour of our water treatment plant, and it's pretty scary when you look at the side that faces the Banana River. We've had an erosion, level of erosion that's been going on there for years, and I mean, it is literally chopping the land away. Something's going to have to be done with that fairly quick in the future.
I can answer to that.
I think it's an easy solution. I think they get in there, and I said this to the people there at the plant, when I toured it. Drop some sheet piling in there and start backfilling that in and build a good solid barrier between that and the Banana River.
I'm so glad you brought that up. So the city is currently engaging with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to address the very problem that you just spoke about, because when you do go out there, it is a little disturbing. Now, that is a very apt word to talk about it, especially on the southern side. The city's engaged with the Army Corps starting in 2021. At the beginning of February of this year, we officially signed on for their Section 14 CAP project, which is their Emergency Stream Bank and Restoration Project, which is specifically designed to do emergency repairs of critical infrastructure, like a water treatment plant. So they're currently undergoing a design study that would see an enhancement of the southern shoreline of the plant with newer design standards that would probably involve, what it's looking right now is a new, much larger coquina riprap, as well as a sheet pile wall behind the coquina riprap, then the addition of plants across the coquina, like mangroves. That design study would be presented to council and would need to be approved. That program allows us to cost share, which is great, on a 65 or on a 65-35 basis. 65 federal, 35 us. So that's great, because such a project would probably be very costly if it was all done by the city. So that is coming down the line. Even though it is an emergency program, it still takes 2 to 4 years to get through. But it is expedited compared to what we do. So that project, or excuse me, that problem is being addressed as we speak.
We are one real bad storm away from losing that side of that plant. And if you've not seen it, I would encourage anyone that wants to go see our water reclamation plant. They'll be more than happy to give you a quick tour of the place.
So boiling all that down, do we have a building plan in work?
Yes.
Is there actual construction planning and actual work getting done?
There's no construction going on right now. They're going through the design phase to tell us what we should construct.
Oh.
That's a year process. It started in February of this year, so it should be done in February of 2025. It has to be reviewed by council to move forward with the funding. I would,
Is there a way to expedite that planning,
not really.
push it hard?
I've said to them what Mr. Stroud said many times, and the Corps has been out there many times, so they're fully aware. But it is one good storm away from a very bad situation.
Well, it goes for the whole state of Florida.
That's true, too.
Okay, thank you, Steve. How about you? Do you have any thoughts?
I really don't. I agree with you, though. I think that compatibility is a really good word to be added, even, just somewhere in there, because it kind of changes it a little bit. You guys did a really good job. It's a lot of work. It was a lot to read, so I can't imagine developing it.
I have nothing to add.
Over to the left. How about you, Nancy?
Well, or Susan?
Susan, I'm sorry.
The other Nancy.
Go ahead.
The other Nancy.
Proceed without me.
No, I think they did a great job, and thank you for giving us what the changes were, because I read the one that was clean, and I thought it was good, and I was like, okay, so we're not changing anything. But no, I'm ready to suggest that we adopt this, present it to the city council with the addition of the policy that looks into the neighboring properties per the wordsmithing that we've discussed, to keep it in general and not get too technical.
Okay, so you want a recommendation to take to council about this, or do we need it?
We're asking for a recommendation.
Okay, help us to word craft it. What kind of motion, how shall we craft the motion for the, we talked about the comprehensive plan. We like it. Please enact it. No, they don't want a motion like that. So what do we,
Yeah, I would phrase the motion that to recommend the proposed ordinance to the city council, including adding an additional objective to the proposed Exhibit A that reflects the language that I previously read into the record.
All right. Then let's approve that kind of motion then that says, say that again, Anthony. I tried to write it in shorthand, but I lost it.
Recommend the proposed ordinance to the city council, including adding an objective to the ordinance to address the language that I read into the record. I can read that in again, but it'll have to be wordsmith. But you have that all, right, Renee?
I have recommend proposed ordinance to city council, including adding an objective to the ordinance to
Include
include.
the additional language that I read into the record regarding compatible elevations and mitigation techniques. I'm just paraphrasing that, and otherwise I have to read it into the record again.
And it's to Exhibit A of the ordinance, not into the
Right.
ordinance.
Additional language that
Amends,
city attorney
yeah.
read into the record.
That amends Exhibit A to include an objective that states that the Code of Ordinances will require new and redevelopment projects to have compatible elevations and mitigation techniques recommended by the city engineer to reduce the potential risk of flooding from new and redevelopment projects on adjacent properties and right-of-way.
Yep.
Something like that. And I can send you that.
If you want like a few word summary, it could be with an adjective added.
If you just say the motion,
I just did.
well, I know, but if you say the motion, then we're just gonna vote on
Say that again, Renee. Say what
it.
now?
So if he states the motion, you're just gonna vote on it, and then I'll have it on record, and that will go into the minute.
I still don't know how to state the motion in a shorthand way. That's a long motion.
I have an idea.
I got an idea. Go ahead there.
So
Go ahead, John.
I'd like to make a motion that we make the recommendation to the council, using the verbiage and words that our city attorney has put together.
Regarding neighboring elevations.
Regarding neighboring elevations.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Okay, did you get it, Renee?
I got it.
Okay. We have a vote. Let's vote.
Okay.
Call the roll.
Nancy Gentlecore,
For the motion.
John Price,
For the motion.
Lamar Russell,
Four.
Stephen Stroud,
For the motion.
Susan Denny.
For the motion.
Okay. That got a little junky there, but you got to be careful with motions, and we just want to give a clear motion or a clear notion to the council what we're recommending. I think we did it. I've got an open discussion question. It's kind of like yes, no, it shouldn't be too difficult. So, I had a break in my reclaimed water line coming from the street. So now, talking to the city about it, the water, getting that turned off so we can deal with the break in the line. So the break was in reclaimed water. That's the purple line coming off the street. Reclaimed. Where does that get processed? How does it get collected, and where does it get processed?
The water that becomes the reclaimed water is processed at the water reclamation facility.
Is that separate from the sewage processing?
That's one and the same. So all of the city's black water, sewage, or water that comes from a toilet, a bathtub, a sink, anything down a drain, not a stormwater drain, a drain within a building, goes to the city's water reclamation facility or a water treatment plant. And it gets processed through I believe it's a 5-stage treatment process that involves mechanical and biological treatment methods. Biological being microorganisms that eat the sewage.
Treat it.
They treat it. They reduce the nutrient count as it goes through the treatment train. If you have not been to the treatment plant, we do host public tours. I'd be happy to facilitate that tour. It's an amazing process. It's a highly regulated process. There's an on-site laboratory that tests for water quality every week that goes up to the state for compliance.
Well, now, just stand by a second. I'm trying to close the loop here so I can explain it to my neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
So, without having a picnic lunch in the yard. So, okay, we collect the water, sewage we collect, street runoff,
We do not collect street runoff.
huh?
We do not collect street runoff. That goes to outfalls that go to the lagoon. Only the stuff.
One of those questions.
Yeah.
So the street runoff in front of my street goes up the street to a big, nice new set of drains that were put in there a few years ago. And it goes over to a lift station and it gets lifted and sent somewhere.
That water doesn't go to a lift station. That just goes gravity fed down to an outfall on the lagoon, usually through a baffle box to clean it a little bit. But that's why we only say rain down the drain. Because if you pour stuff down a storm drain in a street, it's going to go to the lagoon, which is bad. So, but the water treatment plant, that's collecting all of the stuff inside a house drain or a building drain, toilet, sink, shower, bathtub. That goes through the treatment process and is turned into reclaimed water, which is used for irrigation.
That's what we put back out on our yard.
Correct. That's used for irrigation. And when there isn't a demand for irrigation, it can be piped to the lagoon directly, or it can be sent to the underground tanks at Canaveral City Park beneath the ball fields and the green space. There's a system under there that can hold 931,000 gallons of water. When there's no storm water in it, you can pump reclaim there and let it flow into the ground and be naturally filtered.
A corollary question. Do we still provide a share of our reclaimed water with Cocoa Beach?
I don't believe we do.
Once upon a time, we did,
That's correct.
and a lady came in front of us and nearly chewed my ears off because the water had been cut off to Cocoa Beach because they didn't have the water to share. It's dry period. And she said, "We want our water." We had to have her escorted out by one of the uniformed gentlemen.
Oh, wow.
That was a fun night. Okay, so we don't share anymore.
I don't believe so. I think the connection still exists.
We
You'd have
could
to,
if we had to.
I think you have to fact check me on that. You can reach out to our Public Works Services Director, but as far as I know, I don't think there's been a lot of active sharing in recent years. Their plant's a little bigger than ours anyway, so
They have their own now.
they do.
Yeah, it's a big one. I see, you can see it. Do we process anything from the port?
No.
We used to. We don't anymore.
I don't know if we used to, but we definitely don't right now.
Yeah, I know, we used to.
Oh, we did? Okay.
Okay, so they process their own, we
Yeah.
process ours.
Just us.
Okay, so now we turn that into reclaimed water, and it goes back out on the yard. And now, you gotta help me here. The water goes in the drains down the street from my house. I know they go across by gravity across the neighborhood to another big cistern collecting area there. And I was always under the impression that there was a lift station there to lift it so it could go on to wherever it's being treated.
There is a lift station, but it's for sewage, not for stormwater.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what's happened to that stormwater then? It goes over there in that big cistern. I know it goes across the neighborhood into a big collection area. How does it go anywhere? It has to be gravity.
It is to the lagoon. Just runs to the lagoon. Yep. So don't pour paint down the drain.
So that's on the street into the lagoon, no treatment?
There is in the form of a baffle box. But that usually takes out like larger organic debris, litter, trash. But like a liquid, like literal paint or grease that sometimes people put down, that's gonna get into the lagoon. So that's why if you ever see like some of the drains in the city, or should be all of the drains, there's a little symbol above it with a manatee that says something to the effect of like only rain down the drain because it's going to them. So,
Okay, now we know, just so we can talk about it with the neighbors.
yeah, there's an amazing video on the city's YouTube channel. It's about 7 minutes long that explains the water reclamation facility and how it works. It's a little old. The treatment process has been enhanced a little bit, but
What
we
do
can
I
send it to
search
you.
on? When I go to YouTube, what do I search on?
City of Cape Canaveral Water Reclamation Facility. Should bring it up.
Fantastic, okay. That'd be good. I used to think I knew how that system worked, but I don't.
I'll give you a tour. It's great. It doesn't smell that much. You get used to it.
All right, that was old business, open discussion. Anything else?
We talked about the scheduling of the next
Yes,
meetings, right?
absolutely. Which brings us to scheduling of next meeting on January the 8th or the 22nd. All right, how do we do this, Renee? Just ask for a show of hands who can make January 8th, and if they can't make 8, they pick 22.
We can do that.
I can do either or. About you?
I can do either or, but I would prefer the 22nd.
Okay, we got a notion of leaning toward the 22nd. How about you, John?
I can do either one.
22nd, no, I'm here for the 8th. 22nd is the week of the Rolex, and I need that evening to get myself out of here.
The 8th it is.
But we can do the 8th. That's fine.
I got no problem with the 8th, I can do it either or.
City Attorney, can you confirm?
All right, did we settle on the 8th?
The 8th.
January 8th. All right, that's one. The other one was February the 12th or the 26th. How about you, Steve?
I'm good.
Either or?
I pick a day in February, I don't care.
Nancy?
I can't do the 12th, I can do the 26th.
All right, so that boxes it to the 26th already. How about you, John?
I can't do the 12th, I can do the 26th.
Okay, I can do the 26th.
I can do the 20th.
All right, looks like we've settled.
Sure.
January the 8th and February 26th.
Thank you. I put that on the agenda because Renee spends a lot of time calling. We've had every board. And one update in open discussion I just want to provide. I think Zach introduced Abigail Holmes. Yes, Abby Holmes. But she's been with us now for 2 months. And has been doing an outstanding job, especially as we're still not fully staffed. She stepped in for the planner, which is Kyle's position, that is also still vacant, but we do have someone coming online in a month, about a month from today. January 6th is when he's starting from the private sector, but has local public sector experience. So we're very excited for that. I think we're all excited for that because Renee as well, taken over those duties, and we happen to be having every single board meeting requested while this position's been vacant. So thank you for being able to bring your schedules today, because that'll be helpful in planning for me to write those staff reports as we onboard that guy.
Okay, so just near term, I'm going to be out of town December 20 through 28. I'm going home to Tennessee for Christmas, 20 through 28. So does that impact anything? Okay. Any other absences that need to be highlighted? You good? I'm good. Okay. Steve, you good? Nancy? We assume. Michael. All right. That brings us down to the opportunity to adjourn. So Without further ado, I pronounce us adjourned. And did that without a vote.
Getting bold.
Bold, bold.
You had the hammer, I wasn't gonna challenge.
Thank you all.